Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 218. Today, the Amateur Traveler will be talking about remote, pristine beaches and Range Rovers as we go to the Marquesas Islands.
Cathedral, I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we go into this week's interview, I do have one news story for you, and that's a strange one. There's a story that came out of CNN about the search for a $27,000 suitcase, $27,100 in fact. There is actually a bag that exists that will cost you that much money. The thing that I liked about the story is if you buy this Hermès bag and you are considering how you can get it around without getting it scratched up, you can buy a suitcase for it. I kid you not. You can check out that travel story as well as other ones that we talked about this week on This Week in Travel. I'd like to welcome to the show Stefanie Michaels, also known as Adventure Girl, both on Twitter as well as adventuregirl.com, who's come to talk to us about the Marquesas Islands. Stefanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you on the show. I was kind of looking for an excuse to have you on, and then Gary Arndt had mentioned that you had been to this remote part of the world. Where are the Marquesas? And first of all, am I saying it correctly?
Yes, you are saying the Marquesas correctly. It is about, I'm going to say, roughly 800 miles north of Tahiti, of Papeete, and it is considered part of the Tahitian Islands, the French Polynesian Islands. However, they don't want to be considered part of the French Polynesian Islands, which, by the way, French Polynesia consider themselves France, since everything comes out of Paris as far as anything government-wise. So it's the most remote place, I am told, in the world because it is the farthest from any landmass, these group of islands. It's very hard to get to. Really, the best way is by a cruise ship. It's a freighter called the Aranui, and that's spelled Aranui, and you can find them at aranui.com. And they're a freighter. They're basically the lifeline to these islands. They bring product. They bring food. We were on the cruise. They brought a dump truck. things that are really like mandated, that
Sure.
these people need to connect and move forward progressively into the world. So it's really quite a treat. And I just got back. So I was there over the holidays in December, and I can't wait to get back there. I have to say, it's one of those places you really want to get back and really learn more and experience more of the islands.
Okay, now you said it is and it isn't part of, so it's part geographically, but not politically.
No, it is part
It is
politically.
part politically,
It
but
is
they just have a different view. They consider themselves separate in terms of personality or culturally.
culturally,
Okay.
absolutely. Like a lot of the tattoos that you see in Tahiti, they're Marquesan. And the Marquesan people were
Interesting.
the warriors. And because they are set so separate, so north, think about 800 miles. We were a day and a half at sea just to get up into them. And really, I'm told that if you fall overboard, you're basically screwed. I'm sorry to say it that way, but there's not going to be another freighter coming by for 2 weeks. I mean, literally, there's basically no traffic up into those islands. And the Aranui, I think there's one other freighter that goes up there, and that's it. So because they are so remote and they're hard to get to, I always say those are the kind of places that are the best because it is very, as the French call it, sauvage. Just very organic, and there's no development there really. There's like a small, I think, little boutique kind of hotel motel on Nukuhiva, which is one of the main islands, the main hubs, the first island that you technically will get to in the Marquesas. And other than that, there's really no tourism. The only tourism is brought by the Aranui. You can fly in from Papeete. It's about a 3.5 hour flight on a little tiny plane, and it'll cost you about, I think, $600 or $800 a person. So really, the Aranui is the place and the way to go. Plus, there's nowhere to stay on these different islands, really. So at least you're on board ship and you have that hub, that base camp. So
Interesting. Now, what led you to go to this remote, other than the fact that it was remote? How did you hear about it? Who made you interested in it? What were you going to see?
well, I'm all about research, and I'm an adventure girl. So if it, I don't like going to typical touristy places. I will go there, trust me, when invited. However, I really seek out different places in the world that are pretty untouched because I think that's where we learn the most about different cultures and
Hmm.
people can really show us different ways of life. So I was writing a book called Adventure Girl's Guide to Finding Adventure Without Breaking a Nail, available at Amazon.com, by the way. And I was looking for really unique things to do. Like I had heard something about that you could cruise on these freighters. Somewhere in Malaysia, I had heard about that. But I just did some research on good old Google. Where can you cruise on a freighter? And the Aranui popped up as a website. And at the time, it was the Aranui 1. It was the first one. They've now moved on to the Aranui 3.
Was there an Aranui too?
There was an Aranui 2, and there's the 3, and it's owned by a Chinese family. And they believe 4 in their family. The number 4 is bad luck. So it's
Sure.
going to be, they're building a new ship, the Aranui 5.
Sure.
So,
The word for four in Chinese is very close to the word for death.
see, there you have it.
Yeah, it's a general superstition like us and 13.
Okay. There you go. So it will be the Aranui 5 will be their next boat. I think that's being delivered in 2012 or something like that. But this is not a cruise ship in the sense, the traditional sense of the word. They do have a pool on deck, but the meals are good. You're not going to get Epicurean. You're not going to get the buffet.
No midnight buffet.
No buffets. You hang with the crew. I have pictures I've posted where I'm hanging with the crew. There are all these big, huge Marquesan guys without shirts on. They've just moved off, the freight, and they're back on the boat opening beers. And it's a very festive environment, and you are part of the crew. They're not making you work, but you definitely are living, and you're on a freighter. This is not comfort.
And my understanding for a lot of these is they're not necessarily as cheap as I first expect when I hear talking about traveling by freighter. Is that true for this one as well?
I'm not quite sure exactly the price because I was hosted there.
Okay.
I believe it's 4,000 a person, maybe 5,000 a person, but don't quote me. And it depends on the rooms you get.
Okay.
I was down on one of the bottom floors, but they have suites, beautiful suites that kind of overlook everything with big, huge windows. Believe there's like 4 or 8 of those. Best thing to do is go to their website and contact them. And I'm sure the prices adjust per season as well. They have an off season and an on season. So go to aranui.com, and there's all kinds of brochures on there, and it talks about schedules, and it shows a picture of the different islands. You also, by the way, not only hit the Marquesas, but on your way out to the Marquesas, you hit, on the way out and on the way in, 2 of the Tumotu islands. One is Fakarava, and the other one is Rangiroa, and those are the areas where you can get the black pearls.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, really pretty incredible. So, and Fakarava actually has better pricing on pearls than Ringaroa.
Okay. And when we're in the islands, what should we see?
Okay, so basically everything's arranged for you. So that $4,000 or $5,000 price it is per person includes all your food, includes all your transportation once you get to the islands. It includes activities and all kinds of different things. The only thing it doesn't include would be like alcohol on the ship and or if you
Hmm.
take an extra excursion, but everything, pretty much everything is inclusive. Well, what you're going to see is a lot of natural terrain. You're going to meet the Marquesan people. They have anthropologists on board, and
Oh, really?
yes. And so before you hit the islands, they'll have talks and they show slides, what you're going to be seeing, what you're going to be looking at, some of the history, how the people actually migrated out of Micronesia, those islands, and then into Polynesia and then up into the Marquesas. And so you learn a lot historically about the island. So when you get there, you kind of have some sort of a feeling like you've been there before. One of the islands, they'll take you on a 10-mile hike. Other islands, Fatuhiva, I believe it was, that I went on a about a mile hike up into the hills and found three tiki. And they're so ancient. I believe they're several thousand years old. And it's so remote where you're hiking up to that there's not been a lot of research on them and there's not been any digs or anything archaeological. It's basically an untouched archaeological site because the government doesn't have money to do it and or there's little interest to do it at this point. So everything's pretty preserved in place, and I really kind of want to get that to the point. You're not going to see the Marquesas because it's explored. You're going because
Okay.
it's unexplored.
Hmm.
What else can I tell you about it? Let me tell you about how the trip kind of unfolds.
Hmm.
Basically, you're going to leave Papeete, Tahiti. The first island you're going to get to is Fakarava, and that's the first island in the Tuamotus. And that's one of the islands where I was mentioning you can get the pearls. There's a couple little pearl shops, beautiful beaches. If you're really into seashelling and looking for coral, this is the place to do it. White sand beaches, crystal blue waters, very beautiful little island. And then you get back on the boat. You just do a quick stop there, get back on the boat, and you head your day and a half up into the Marquesas. And the first island you'll typically hit is Nukuhiva. And it's the biggest island. It has probably the most civilized, the most community as all the islands, and you can shop a little bit in town. They'll take you to one of the churches there. You'll have lunch, a locals lunch, which is lovely. It's all fresh fish. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful little restaurant there. And of course, the people are very festive and they're very excited to see you and very warm. Oh, and by the way, they speak three languages. The two primary are Marquesan, French, and then English. And the people are just warm and they're beautiful. And you get back on the boat. They've now unloaded their dump trucks, unloaded food, vegetables, and then picked up fruits, vegetables, things that are going to go on now into the other islands. So off we go, and you'll hit another island called Wapua, and you come to a little port, and it's beautiful, and there's like a little marketplace with the locals, and you can pick up pearls, and I picked up a little handcrafted purse. And it's again remote. You can actually hike on one of those islands, and then you head on to Wahuka and onto Hiva Oa and Fatuhiva and Tahuata. And it's funny because when you're on the boat and you're like, "Where are we going today? Where the what? Huka Niva Hafa Fata?" Because the islands start to sound the same, but each one gets more and more remote. By the time you get to Fatuhiva, which is probably one of the most remote. It's very dry and arid, and it looks very deserty. So that was pretty interesting because I thought all the islands would be very kind of subtropic.
Uh-huh.
Not the case. So you get a diversity in islands as well. And each of the people on the different islands are a little bit different. So their dances, their culturally, they have a little bit of a different spin. So that's also fascinating to see. And some of the islands are known for their chopra, which is the inside of the coconut that is dried and they use for the manoi oil. Other islands are known for their specialty wood carving. And you can go to a cultural center on Fatuhiva, I believe, and buy some of the tiki. Now, I will say one thing about we being American and on the US dollar, it is expensive.
Right.
I'd say the exchange is probably right now about 150, 160 to our US dollar. So just be prepared to kind of know, even though everything is pretty much covered for you on the front end, if you want to buy souvenirs, if you want to do anything that's a little bit extra, you're going to be paying that exchange. It's on the Polynesian French franc. Just realize that going in. So, for example, I think I purchased a beautiful hand carved basket out of a special kind of wood, all one piece. So just beautifully hand carved, but it was about $200.
Okay.
So yeah, our exchange doesn't do us any favors right now. And also, let me tell you too, the people on the boat are very well traveled. I mean, these are people that have kind of been there, done it. One of the gentlemen on the boat, he's the other train company owner other than Richard Branson. So he and his wife were on the boat.
Okay.
But, and we had a woman from South Africa with like a 10-carat rock on her hand. Why she brought that, I have no idea.
Oh,
but she's one of the biggest manufacturers of women's goods and women's retail in South Africa. So these people are very well traveled. So when you get there, you're going to be with some Tahitians that are taking holidays, Parisians that are taking holidays, possibly living there and teaching in Tahiti, and then also kind of eclectic worldwide travel society. It's really interesting.
And I would think with the number of people, you're actually getting to know your fellow passengers possibly more than you would even on a large cruise ship.
Absolutely.
You better like the people you're traveling with somewhat.
Oh, yeah, there was about 160 of us. That's it in total. So, which is really nice. So you get that very small cruise feeling. You're on this big freighter. You do have luxuries. You can do your own laundry if you want to, and they have laundry service. So either way, you can do that. They do have the 3 meals a day, and they're full meals, French wine, Tahitian beer. There is a really nice atmosphere on the boat, and everybody gets along. And what I really loved coming out of the Marquesas and knowing that I had that day and a half back, I got seasick on the way, by the way.
No.
So coming back, I was like, oh, I'm going to get seasick. So they gave me the patch. But what the Marquesans do on the boat is they entertain you. And so they sing you home. So they'll start in the morning and they do some dancing and then they sing and then they go upstairs outside this bar area. It's like a little covered area and they sit out there with their guitars and their drums and they sing you home. So it's kind of one of those aha moments where you're like, wow, this is unique and different. I call it uncruising. Where can you uncruise out of these amazing islands and be sung home by these locals?
Interesting.
Yeah, very kind of moving and really interesting experience.
Now, you're adventure girl.
Yes.
And so you did a lot of research before you went.
Yes.
What surprised you, though?
Oof. This is where Paul Gauguin spent a couple years. And actually, he's buried there. You hear about the beauty, you see the pictures, but then when you get there, it's so serene and it's so peaceful. And because there's that lack of like really contemporary civilization in the sense of buildings and hotels and you just have nothing. It's remote. It's just so untouched that you feel like you're somewhere special. And the beauty is just all encompassing. There's just this aura. And it's, again, I travel all over the world and there's very few places I'd like to go back to. I'm always like, oh, move on. Let's do something next and something different. But here, I really want to go back and do it again. And that's really a big thing for me to even say that. So by all means, people, if you feel like you've done it all and seen it, and even if you don't think you've done it all or seen it, this is really a important, magical place to go. And it also is important because they really, really want to break away from the French Polynesia, the Tahitian islands. They really want to be their own people, their own culture. And having said that, they must rely on Paris, they must rely on the political, and they're all heavily funded and they're helped because for survival, they need to. However, they want to go direct to Paris. They want to be their own country. Initially, when they were discovered and they were pretty much taken over, I think there was about 18,000 Marquesans. In the 70s, it went down to about 2,000. They were basically wiped out from disease and just being conquered over the century.
And when you say the 70s, we're not talking about the 1970s that they were.
Yes, we are talking about the 1970s.
All right.
There were about 2,000 of them.
Now, I think some of that would have been just immigration.
Some immigration as well, yes. But, you have to remember when the Western culture comes into a remote isle or islands. The diseases, yeah.
Sure.
And because they were so remote, it was very difficult for them, for the people up there. Now they're back to around I believe there's 8 islands. There are about 7,000 or 8,000 inhabitants right now, locals. And I had a really wonderful talk. One of the guys on the cruise is very shy, but he looks like a big, huge, scary man. He's huge. He's a big, huge Marquesan man. with tattoos on half his face and down his
That's what I
body.
was going to think. Okay. Uh-huh.
Yes, yes. And his name is Mahalo. And he is the crane operator, one of the crane operators, these ginormous cranes on the front of the ship that unload and load the content. And he and his sister are the last of the Marquesan royalty. Their father and mother were the chief, the king and queen of the Marquesans. And he now is the crane operator, and she does the laundry. She heads up all the laundry and the services on the boat. And I asked him, I was fortunate to be granted an interview. He never interviews. And I had to go through a translator and say, I'd like to interview him in Marquesan out of respect for his culture. And he agreed to the interview. And he said he just feels that the French don't listen and that his people want their independence. And he feels that being this crane operator and bringing product to his people and moving the product from one island to the other and creating trade and commerce, that he's helping his people and that he's very proud of what he does. And to really talk to him, he's very, I want to say, emotional about his people and what he can do for
Sure.
them, and hopes in his lifetime that he'll be able to see their independence. So it's really also from a cultural standpoint to be on the boat with these guys and to get to know them. You really see more than what you would see typically on like a normal touristy
Sure. Hmm.
type of experience. So you really get to know these
A
guys.
little more immersive that way.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
feel like I've left a little piece of me there, because I've learned so much. And I feel there's this kindred spirit to be independent and to be adventurous and to step out on your own. And that these Marquesans are really trying to do that. They're really trying to work with Paris directly on becoming their independent, have their own money, do their own thing. Whether it's going to happen or not, who knows? But in the interim, it's just this incredible, magical place. And I hope people just jump on board and really go out there and support the culture. It's really what it's all about.
And of all the adventures you had while you were there, what day stands out as the best day?
There's two. One is on Fatuhiva, where we hiked and just saw just pure beauty, and it was magical. And then the last day, actually leaving the islands and being sung home. I mean, it
Okay.
was really one of those special moments in time, and hopefully everybody can experience that and just experience the warmth and the culture of getting to know the people on board. So,
Okay. Is there anything you wish you had known before you went?
ooh, that's good. Yeah, the exchange rate. I mean, you
Yeah.
hear French Polynesia being very expensive.
Right.
I just wish I prepared more for it. And also, I have to brush up on my French. My gosh, petit peu. That's about as much as I can speak. Really, I tried to not go in with many expectations. I mean, obviously, I researched it and I saw, but I really wanted to go in there and just kind of try and be open and see what it's about. There is something really interesting because the government funds them and
Right.
gives them tax incentives and literally if you want to go open a business there, they give you 50%. The government helps fund business. Well, what they do in retribution for all the nuclear testing that went on in French Polynesia, they've allotted X amount of dollars per person per Tahitian. So you land on these islands, for example, Nukuhiva, and everybody was driving Range Rovers. I'm like,
Oh,
what?
funny.
What is going on? This is like one of those odd things, right? You're in the middle of this non-commercialized place, and you land, and everyone's got Range Rovers and Defenders and LR3s, brand new ones, not like old ones. And so I asked one of the Marquesan guys on the ship. I said, "What's that all about?" And he said, "Well, it's a status symbol." And so they'll live in these very casual, very simple homes, very small, simple homes, but they'll have a $80,000 car. So it was interesting to kind of see that. I'm
And
like,
not really that far to drive, actually.
and not, I was going to say, where do you go with these things? And he says, well, the Aranui, they bring your passengers. And so we like to take you in style because they do take you on these adventure treks up into the hills with these
Sure.
trucks. So there you have it. Kind of one of those interesting facts. So when you get there, and you'll remember this, and hopefully you'll laugh. You'll have a little chuckle over it because it was very interesting. And some of the other islands, it depends. Okay, culturally, here's a little bit of the differences. Some wanted the Japanese cars, so we would get off, and there would be like the Infinities. So, very interesting.
As you look at your pictures from your trip, what picture brings you right back there? What picture really captured the islands for you?
I took a lot of video, actually.
Okay.
So watching the videos, it was pretty amazing.
Any particular video that just really captured it for you?
The hike. I think the hike up into the tiki, where the tikis were, and you walk
Okay.
up into these just rows and rows of natural palm trees with nothing really on the ground except just moist soil, and it was so organic, and it just was almost like a spiritual experience being in that kind of raw nature.
Okay.
And then heading up, and then here's these tiki on the side of a mountain with views of this harbor, Hane Bay. It's just magical. And I think that was probably one of those snapshots in my mind where I go there, when things get a little stressful at home, I'm like, okay, I'm walking through the palm groves, and you'll pass like a wild horse, and it's really stunning scenery.
Okay. As we go to wind this down, when did you feel closest to home and when did you feel furthest from home?
Interesting.
What was familiar and what was different?
There wasn't really anything familiar.
Interesting.
I mean, minus dropping off in Nuku Hiva, and there's the Land Rovers. I mean, I drive one,
right.
so so that was familiar. But yeah, everything was different, and from the sights to the smells to the taste of the food to culturally, it was just all so different, and it was so exciting.
So culturally, for instance, what was the most different thing that you ran into?
Gosh, this is really good. Well, you asked really good questions, Chris. Um, well, just the mindset of the people and the fact that they live so simply, but then there's the dichotomy that they have these amazing cars. So I just think culturally, I've never really seen that kind of straight, kind of simple, bare boning existence. They have electricity and running water, that type of stuff. However, then they have these really, really expensive vehicles, and that's what's somewhat important to them. So I just think there's like that kind of interesting cultural, they're so wanting to be steeped in culture and their history and bring back what they had lost and what was taken from them. However, they're very quick to embrace modern conveniences like a Range Rover.
So, last two questions. Finish this sentence for me. You really know you're in the Marquesas Islands when
you've been on the sea for a day and a half and you feel the boat kind of turning and in calm water, and you look out your window and there's land.
Okay.
And you just know you're there. I mean, you just know you're there. That's how you know you're there.
All right. And if you had to summarize the Marquesas in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Spectacular.
Okay.
Sauvage.
Sauvage, okay.
And remote.
Okay. Stefanie, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing with us your obvious love for the Marquesas Islands. Where can people find more about you?
At adventuregirl.com, and you can also follow my feed on twitter.com/adventuregirl.
And I understand you have a few followers on Twitter.
Yes, I do. I do have a few. Yes.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks, Chris.
I have one internet resource for you today, and that is a site called breezenet.com. And that is a site that can help you find deals on car rentals, not just car rentals at the airport when you fly in. Some of these you may have to go into the city, but you might be able to get a cheaper deal by doing that. And I should point out that this is something that I learned from Pauline Fromer, and Pauline Fromer will actually be our guest next week because we're going to talk about budget travel again. She's been on the show once, and we're going to do that again. And as long as we're talking about future plans, I should point out the week after that we'll go back to the Pacific and be talking about Easter Island. And the week after that we'll be talking about the Republic of Georgia. And as long as I'm talking about the Republic of Georgia, my apologies to Kent and to his fiancée. After not having anyone pitch me the Republic of Georgia, I had 2 different people pitch me the same destination within a short period of time and didn't realize that I was talking to 2 different people about doing an interview. So I left Kent and his fiancée high and dry, who just got back from a trip to Georgia, and my apologies publicly to them for that. In other news from the community, I got a letter from Caroline who said, I really enjoyed your recent podcast on travel photography. My only complaint is that you waited until I returned from my trip to India to air it. On that note, I was wondering if you've considered doing more with the Amateur Traveler Flickr group. It seems underutilized, but could be a great way for your readers to engage with and inspire each other. Perhaps you could host periodic photo contests and feature the winners on your blog and or podcast. As someone who's recently taken up photography, I obviously have an ulterior motive in mind when I suggest this, but I do think it would be a fun addition
addition to your show and would draw even more listeners. Keep up the good work, Caroline in Washington, D.C. I like the idea. I'm open to suggestions for what a theme could be for the first Flickr contest. I don't have any particular prizes in mind. I'd love to do some sort of prize for that. So if you have ideas, let me hear them. But I think that's a great idea. I'd like to encourage more travel photography. And as I announced last week, I'm actually talking with Ralph, who is our guest on Travel Photography. He and I are looking at doing a tour in September. Now, we're still going back and forth between cruising the Greek islands or maybe even going to Egypt, or we're kind of looking at different options, but do circle September on your calendar for an amateur traveler and Ralph Velasquez photography trip. With that, we'll end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. The Amateur Traveler is a member of the Travelcast Network. Check that out for other great travel podcasts. And if you want to reach me, feel free to drop me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com. Better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, either at Amateur Traveler for just Amateur Traveler news, or Chris2X for more information about what I'm up to. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more